1994, while the eyes of the world were pointed at Sarajevo, where the Winter Olympic Games were being held, the Reagan administration was specifically targeting the Yugoslav economy in a secret memo, National Security Decisions Directive 133, which stated that U.S. policy will be to promote the trend towards a market-oriented Yugoslav economy. And it was in line with previous decisions directives which advocated expanded efforts to promote a quiet revolution to overthrow communist governments and parties.
It triggers a whole series of other initiatives, most of which are not published. The decision directive simply states that what the United States would want to achieve is that Yugoslavia cease to be a market socialist economy and become a free market economy model on the West.
As the Soviet system was on its last legs in 1988, Washington wasted no time in sending advisors to Yugoslavia from a non-profit organization with a high-sounding name, the National Endowment for Democracy, or NED.
Good morning and welcome. It's good to have you all here to help celebrate the launching of a program with a vision and a noble purpose. The establishment of the National Endowment goes right to the heart of America's faith in democratic ideals and institutions.
However, Alan Weinstein, who planned the NED, told the Washington Post in 1991 that a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA. This basically means that the NED was really a sort of CIA spin-off.
Instead of having just the CIA going around behind the scenes and trying to manipulate the process secretly by inserting money here and instructions there and so forth, they have now a sidekick, which is this National Endowment for Democracy, NED.
Thus, the NED started handing out generous bribes in every corner of Yugoslavia, financing opposition groups, buying up hungry young journalists with dreams of a new life, and financing trade union opposition, pro-IMF economists, and human rights NGOs. The National Endowment for Democracy also controls and pays for the Center for International Private Enterprise, which in turn funded the G17. Who were the G17? They were an NGO made up of 17 free market economists, with 3 of the leading members being Washington-based staff members of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, Dusan Vujovic, Željko Bogatic, and Branko Milanovic. G17 coordinator Professor Veselin Vukotic worked closely with the World Bank, and as the Minister of Privatization under Yugoslav Premier Ante Markovic, he was in charge of the World Bank bankruptcy program in Yugoslavia during 1989 and 1990, which led to the devastation of the Yugoslav economy. Other members of the G17 consult for the World Bank and attend World Bank-organized meetings. In 2002, they formed a political party in Serbia, and since then, despite the fact that in every election they've gotten between 7 and 11% of the popular vote, G17 controlled the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economy of Serbia. This is not simply a group of economists. It is a network. The IMF and World Bank use this network to impose their policies on Yugoslavia. And how do they do it? First, they force governments to do away with any social protections, subsidized food or rent, free transportation, free medical care, all those things you don't really need, out the window.
You cut back in public sector spending, you cut wages, you cut employment, you abolish worker management enterprises. In other words, you force your people to work harder for less.
Second, they use economic manipulation and new laws to force businesses, public and private, into bankruptcy.
The World Bank describes this mechanism as a trigger mechanism. And they use that term. They say we need to trigger the bankruptcy of Yugoslav industry.
Then, these businesses are taken over by a small clique of leveraged buyout speculators and other powerful foreign economic interests. They purchase the businesses at rock-bottom prices.
Creditors could simply take hold of these enterprises within a 45-day period, and either the enterprise had to close down or it was privatized.
This is called privatization through liquidation. World Bank data confirms that under Vukotic's direction from January 1989 to September 1990, more than 1,100 industrial firms were wiped out. The standard of living declined 18% between January and October 1990. This downturn raised unemployment to 20% and thus increased tensions between the republics.
Impoverished the population through these sweeping IMF reforms, which in turn contributed to heightening social and ethnic strife.
So you have dissatisfaction of everybody, and everybody's looking for a guilty party.
Čovjek kad nema ništa i kad nije osvešćen u egzistencijalnom smislu, on se hvata za one vrste ideja koje mogu da probude u njemu čoveka. a to su najčešće te nacionalne priče, te religijske priče, jer on osjeća se nekako bitnim kad ga neko osme, pa da, oni su krivi, a ne ja.
In desperation, Prime Minister Marković visited Washington to meet with President George H. Bush. He said that rising tensions among nationalities would be a consequence of his austerity privatization plan. So he asked for $1 billion in aid and said that if aid didn't come, there would be trouble. And we all know the Americans didn't want any trouble.
In November 1990, President George Bush went to the U.S. Congress and pressured them to pass the foreign appropriations law that called for the cutting off of all aid and credits to Yugoslavia. The law also demanded that if any republic in Yugoslavia wanted further U.S. aid, it would have to break away from Yugoslavia and declare its independence. Okay, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's not my speculation, it's not my analysis, it's a public law. It's a public law. It required the U.S. State Department approval of election procedures and results in every one of the republics. It required that the republics do not hold national elections, but hold elections only in their own republics, and that the aid would go individually to those republics. And when the aid did go, it went to those groups which the U.S. defined as democratic groups, which meant small right-wing ultra-nationalists and even fascistic parties.
This fracturing of Yugoslavia was not the result of pre-existing internal divisions. Those internal divisions were heightened as a result of an outside intervention.